Fun in the sun this weekend because Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Endurance Cup, moves to Paul Ricard. It's our annual visit to the French circuit and, of course, our annual 6-hour race that will begin at 6 p.m, finish at midnight. So we go from sunshine to dusk to darkness, and we have had some fascinating races in the past here with so many different elements being thrown at the drivers and thrown at the teams. It is, as you might anticipate, a nice warm day. We are just approaching 11:30 local time, and it's qualifying coming up. The drivers will be released into the session very shortly, and when they do so, it will be the usual format of the 3 drivers having to do a session each, and the aggregate time determines the grid. So we have the cars making their way shortly down the pit lane. David Addison and John Watson trackside. John, it's a fast circuit, it's a circuit that always has a breeze, and it's got echoes of the past here as well.
And it's got sunshine, and we've got warmth. So as we're having a quick look, and again the Tracer is going far too quick for me to keep up, but this is another lap record from the Tracer this time around the Paul Ricard circuit. Depending on the map you're looking at, there are a number of 15 turns here on this particular circuit. Lap length 5.7 kilometers, 3.5 miles. And of course, the corner that is the maker or breaker on this racetrack is at the end of the long Mistral Straight scene. And that was the scene, in fact, of a fairly substantial accident yesterday in practice when the 95 Beach Team AMR Aston Martin, driven by Marco Sorensen, went off, had a massive tank slapper, and the car ended up in the barriers, heavily damaged, especially around the rear.
Yeah.
Team have worked, well, how can you say tirelessly? That's an understatement. The car is back. It's going to be a runner. Marco Sorensen has got a slight bit of damage on his left ankle. He got a cut on his left ankle. He's been cleared to drive, so no problem for the 95 Aston Martin. But a scary moment at the quickest corner here on this Paul Ricard circuit.
Well, the driver's getting ready. Qualifying has just been delayed ever so slightly by 5 minutes or so to 11:35, and the driver's getting themselves set for the first part of qualifying. Number 32 there, Dries van Thor, after coming together last week at the Nürburgring in the 24 hours with his brother. They went side by side up the Dottinger Höhe, and contact was made, and Laurens van Thor was certainly in the barriers and out of the race as a legacy of that. Dries went on to win it, and Laurens said it was hardly his finest hour. Charles Weerts wasn't here yesterday because he was busy at a school exam, his English exam, or university exam rather than school, I should say. So he missed the driver's briefing, but focusing now on being a racing driver rather than being a student. So the cars are good to go, and with one, I understand, that has been withdrawn, the Bentley number 107, that was withdrawn earlier with an engine drama, the Stefan Lemaire, Antonin Borger, Nigel Bailly car. That means we're down to 53, but you know, that's still enough to make track space and a clear bit of real estate a real rarity.
Doesn't matter how big the circuit is. Spa-Francorchamps, you know, one of the longer circuits on the calendar, with 53 cars, all battling, or maybe trying to avoid one another into turn 1 and all the way around in the opening, maybe even up to the first 30 minutes of the race later on this evening. It's very difficult, and that's why qualifying is, for the pro category in particular, such an important element. And there's the car that was quickest, or maybe it was the sister car, there was a 71. Antonio Fuoco last night set that car's and the fastest time of all, 1:54.328. So those Ferraris, because they were first and second quickest last night, clearly looking very good.
Absolutely, and we know that Ferraris go well around here. We have seen it in the past, whether it's been AF Corsa or Kassel. Ferraris go well. We've also gained this weekend another Porsche, which is from the Singer Racing Team, formerly a customer of Ferrari. But Piti Bhirombhakdi, Tanat Satarin-Tirakul, and the New Zealander Matthew Payne joined the Gold Cup with a Porsche. Fred Vervies ready to go in number 46. Now this, of course, colloquially known as the Valentino Rossi Audi, had dramas with the engine yesterday, didn't it?
Yes, they had. I saw one of the engineers this morning, and I said, what was the problem? Why did you want that lap this morning, that one more lap that would allow you to check the motor right? I said, well, yes, there was a problem, but so it couldn't quite get to the crux of what the problem was. It was a mechanical problem, but maybe actually by mechanical he meant probably electrical, Or actually, what he really meant was a bit of both.
Right.
So I'm no wiser.
Okay, but we know that they had a problem, and they hope it's fixed. As you look at Stefano Costatini, ready to go in the Pro-Am AF Corsa Ferrari that he shared with Louis Macchiels and Andrea Bertolini. Louis Macchiels, serial Pro-Am champion, and he will go later on in the session. So we are, what, about 3 minutes or so away from being in business. The fast lane is open. In other words, if you want to drive down to the end of the pit lane, you can. You're ready to go. But otherwise, then just sit and wait. But each of these sessions, 15 minutes in length. Now, given the length of the lap, 5 kilometres long, you don't have much time to do flying laps, do you? Because an outlap itself takes up quite a chunk.
I mean, they're short sessions, but you've got 53 cars all trying to get onto the track to accomplish what they want to do. That's their best lap for each of the 3 drivers in the 3 qualifying segments. It's very difficult. And how do you find a clear lap for this number of cars on this length of circuit? You can't. You can't work it out. You just got to be in the right place, right time, and hope that when you're completing your one flying lap that's going to give you that pole position, you don't come across as somebody who's on the way in or preparing to go onto a flying lap. You depend an awful lot on the track marshals around the racetrack to wave those blue flags to indicate that there are quicker cars coming behind. But, you know, it's the same for everybody. But there will be many a driver, particularly amongst the pros, who will be absolutely, I'm not going to even say what I want to say, that their best lap was spoiled. And it is critical for the pro category in particular that they get clear laps, because that's where the race is going to be won. But having said that, there were some really good performances last night. The quickest silver car, sorry, the quickest gold car was 6th quickest. That was the HAP racing team, Mercedes. Very good effort, 6th quickest.
So the cars are set, ready to go. Last few checks being made, and the start time, as I say, just put back to 11:35. So won't be long before the green flag is shown at the end of the pit lane. There is the Jota McLaren, which Rob Bell, as ever, is one of the drivers of, sharing with Ollie Wilkinson and Marvin Kirchhofer. But that's a team, Marvin Kirchhofer to go first, that's really struggling to get a handle on this new tyre, and other teams, other brands doing so. Depending on who you talk to, it's a real dark art trying to get on top of it. You can be absolutely fine one day, you come back the following morning, different time of day for a different session, the car can feel completely different.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for a team, and you've got such a diversity of experience. You know, Marvin Kirchhofer, very experienced, Oliver Wilkin, less experienced, learning on the job, as they say, and Rob Bell, of course, who's a consummate professional.
Yeah.
But if you've got a very narrow operating window, and the characteristic that the car, in this case the 38 McLaren, is experiencing is that you've got this very sudden rear-end breakaway, and when it breaks away, there's very little you can do to catch it. Now, the old fix in the old days would have been, let's play with rear cambers, let's fiddle about with tyre pressures. All those have now been taken away, principally because of Pirelli, and their concerns about people running excessive rear camber, then overheating the inside shoulder, and then leading to tyre failures. So pressures and cambers, especially at the rear, which is what you might want to do, that tool has been taken away from you.
Now there is the rebuilt Beech Dean Aston, Marco Sorensen, after his accident at Senior very, very early in free practice yesterday. He shares the car with Maxime Martin and Nicky Thiem, but you would not think that that had been in the wars to the extent that it had yesterday. It was a sizable off up at Senior. I mean, you don't have a small off there, do you?
No, and we saw images of the car while it was stuck literally against the barrier, and the left rear bodywork was non-existent. Now, there's not a lot of bodywork on these cars. You've got carbon fibre. When that is stripped away, or it is damaged, as in the case of the 95 Aston Martin, all you see is the bare bones of the chassis, and that's what we were looking at, the bare bones of the 95 Aston.
Green flag wave then, so out they pour, and you've got the Garage 59 McLarens venturing down the pit lane, number 20 ready to go, the Dominic Baumann, Valentin Pierberg, Martin Conrad Mercedes, Dominic Baumann, the very rapid Austrian driver, to go first. SPS Automotive Performance brought Mercedes to the GT2 category a couple of weeks ago at the Red Bull Ring, and amongst the drivers, one Stefan Rattel, who partnered with Bert Schneider, but SPS becoming an increasingly important Mercedes customer. We've got used to seeing ASP, for example, or Haupt and Black Falcon before that as leading Mercedes team, but SPS year on year gets better and better. Jean-Baptiste Simonard in the Rothko WRT Audi set to go. So the teams working their way through the new tyres and then working out when best to release the cars.
We're already 1 minute out of 15 into this session, and there's still, what, 3/4 of the cars in the pit lane.
Yeah.
They've got to go out. Their out laps will probably be around about 2 minutes and a bit or whatever. And then they've got to find that clear space, and it is just an absolute. And also, the white demarcation line, look at that line in the middle of your frame. That is the demarcation line. If you cross that line before you rejoin the circuit, you will be penalised.
New car for the Sky Tempesta racing team this season, new chassis for them for this weekend. The Eddie Cheever, Jonathan Hui, Chris Froggatt combination, switching from Ferrari to Mercedes for this year. They've been busy, Chris Froggatt and Jonathan Hui, in British GT as well as Fanatec GT, Endurance and Sprint, trying to get used to the car. Gruppa M running it, but strides further forward being taken. And it has been a big change this year because they've all been experienced in Ferraris. It really is something very, very different indeed.
Well, I understand the car was damaged in a post-manicure sprint event test, and the team, I understand, brought in a DTM driver, because DTM now is GT3, to see whether the problem was a car problem, a technical problem, or was it a driver problem. And from what my well-known friend, rumour has it, told me, that the DTM driver was about half a second a lap quicker immediately.
Right.
And then the regular drivers got back in behind the wheel, and that's when the incident occurred.
Okay, well, here you've got drivers pushing on for a time, others just leaving the pit lane. So Sebastian Bode there, number 3 Mercedes, on the money for the Get Speed team that he shares with Valdemar Eriksson and Jeff Kingsley. Sebastian Bode moving up from GT4 to GT3 for this season. And now out of L'École onto the Mistral straight. Just to make the point that for GT3 cars in Fanatec GT, they have the entirety of the straight, whereas for the support categories, they've got the chicane to break it up.
And really, I think having the chicane there, I understand why it was it was installed, because concern about the speed going into scene. But these cars, these are proper race cars, driven mostly by very accomplished and professional drivers. Not all, but it's the big challenge here at this racetrack, is to get through that and stay inside those flappy marker cones on the exit of scene. So it was always the big challenge of this racetrack, to get up into scene. In the good old days, if anybody could take it flat out, they were very, very brave indeed. They'd also be pretty quick.
Well, there's Bode heading up towards the line. Others are doing good sectors, but it's only at the end of the lap, really, that we start to identify all of this. And bear in mind, of course, also that it's not just the session in isolation that we need to look at. It is the 3 sessions, that combined average across those 3. What you will have on the timing tower is going to be, for sessions 2 and 3, that average. So we can refer to what's going on in an individual session, and the graphic on the screen will give us the overall situation. So Sebastian Bode does a lap time of 1:58.3. Others still getting the tyres up to temperature, including in the background Raffaele Marciello there.
I mean, that's all Marciello needs. Building to do a lap, and he sees a car ahead of him, which is, what is he doing? Why has Marciello gone so far wide coming through scene? But clearly, here's a car that would be one of your, let's say, top 6 as a potential pole sitter, depending just where the Mercedes is in relative overall lap times with Ferrari, with Audi, with other brands. So yesterday, it certainly clearly was the Ferrari with the class of the field, but it all depends on the tyre you're running and just what effort you put into those 2 sessions. So Marciello makes his way around the penultimate corner, but traffic ahead. So how's he going to find a way through all this? Well, if he doesn't, if he lifts off, he loses another lap. So we might as well just stick with it and hope that the Ferrari ahead is one of the Iron Lynx Ferraris, which is going to be a pretty quick car.
Now there, Fred Verviche has done the absolute best within the first sector. So whatever those dramas, electrical or engine related yesterday, they seem to have been put to bed. Lorenzo Petresi has now done the fastest time, son of Riccardo Petresi, who is here this weekend. And of course, who we did see in the Spa 24 Hours for Honda a few years back. And 54.9 is the gun time. Petresi ahead of Marciello, and then Maxime Martin shown as being 3rd in the Aston Martin ahead of Lucas Legere.
And that's the Aston Martin that was heavily damaged yesterday. So great job indeed by the Aston team to get that car built, but also to be able to run immediately on the pace. Marciello has popped up into 2nd place. Maro Engel now is quickest of all, still 3/10 or so away from the times we saw in the much cooler air last night. Let's look at the 46, Fred Verviche.
So Verviche tries to find a way through the traffic, but get used to it because you're not going to get a clear lap. It's an impossibility. Verviche to the timing line. He's on the tail of the McLaren, almost pushing it down the pit straight there. That was 1:59 that he was on the back of. Manuel Maldonado. Verviche goes through. Mauro Engel has gone quickest. Verviche was third, so it's Engel, Mirko Bortolotti, then Verviche, the top three.
So we haven't seen an awful lot of Mirko Bortolotti either until suddenly, no surprise there, the Alfred Racing Lamborghini pops up to where one would assume that that car will be. But of course, two more drivers behind the wheel. It'll be Jack Aiken and then Albert Costa, and I suspect it'll be in that order as we watch Fred Verviche on board the 46. Currently in third, fastest overall, 5.63, the VSR Lamborghini. Where did that come from?
Well, that's Michele Beretta. Beretta has shot to the top of the times, 1:54.500. He's, what, 800ths quicker than anybody else. And now Dries Van Thor goes to the top with Daniel Serra's Ferrari, the car that was quickest in free practice last night, going second. And somebody's had an off there. Now, which of the many Audis is that?
I think a right rear maybe down. It looks...
You're right, yeah. It's the Boutsen car of Adam Matecki. Now, he's got a grid drop, hasn't he? Because he racked up enough behavioural warning points over the course of yesterday and Imola to give himself a grid drop. And let's have a look, John.
Oh, there it is. The right rear completely, detached almost from the rim. If there's any tyre left, it doesn't look like there's much of that tyre left at all.
Interesting to see what's caused that, because it's early in the lap and with 7 minutes of the session having happened. So he's limping it back round towards the Mistral, but Eteki in strife. Right, so Dries Van Thor is the fastest by 42 thousandths from Daniel Serra. Just had Nick Yellowly's BMW move up to 8th, but this is looking good for Dries Van Thor, Charles Weerts and Calvin van der Linde, the other drivers. The band is back together this weekend.
Yeah, and they are fractionally quicker than the best time from the Ferrari, that yellow one there following from last night. So Dries Van Thor absolutely on it all the way through. Not just here, but he's just come back from that success of the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, where he beat up his brother, and not only beat up his brother, he beat up his brother's Porsche to such an extent. It's a trash bin Porsche GT3R.
And many of the drivers from here and many of the teams and engineers hot-footed tomorrow morning to Le Mans for the test in anticipation of next weekend's 24 Hours. So it's a really, really busy period. WRT, for example, running this army of cars here and having to then hot-foot it to Le Mans, so split between so many different programs.
Fred Verviche, number 46. Gone quickest. Quicker than last night by a bigger margin than we saw from Dries Van Thor.
78 thousandths he is quicker. There, number 98 BMW goes through. That's Nick Yellowly in this new, for this year, Rover Racing Run M4, heading up towards the end of the lap. So the M4 of Nick Yellowly a little bit down in the middle sector. Christopher Haase improving as well, and Dan Harper's BMW, number 50, that's also just worked its way up into 9th in the times.
Wonder is it coincidence or not, but the quickest two drivers here are both in the winning car at Nürburgring.
They certainly come here on a high, don't they?
They certainly do come here on a high. Now, I wonder what the other drivers in the 46 Audi are going to be thinking. Wow, Nico Müller, well, we know Nico can deliver, but again, Valentino Rossi, desperate to get a performance which he knows he's got, but just it's learning the Audi, learning racetracks on four wheels rather than on two, and it's just taking it longer for him than he would want it to take.
On which note, let me throw a sort of team management question at you, because we know that there are 3 drivers and 6 hours. If you were running number 46 and you want to give Rossi the track time, would you give him 2 1-hour stints or 1 2-hour segment, so he's in the car for all of that time?
I would give him the maximum amount of nighttime driving.
Okay.
Because ultimately this is a sort of preparation for Spa 24 Hours. And to my knowledge, other than the Le Mans 24-hour endurance event, which I'm not sure Valentino Rossi might have competed in, I would want him to get as much nighttime driving as is possible. Ultimately, whether he does single stints or double stints, but I would give him a lot of nighttime driving just to be able to get to grips with it. It is such a different experience. Here at Paul Ricard, it's not floodlit. around as other racetracks are for nighttime racing. So he needs as much time behind the wheel in darkness as I can think he needs.
Dries van Thor has gone back to the top, 153.864. Yeah, I'd be tempted to leave, however they do it, but leave Valentino Rossi in for the full 2 hours, because that way he's not having to break up the stint. He's constantly behind the wheel, but it rather depends on whether he wants to do it that way and how the team feel the strategy will plan out. Now, is 6 hours of real endurance racing going to bring Porsche back into the mix? Because they were a bit anonymous, the 911s at Imola. Klaus Bachler, right now, second fastest, but coming up to traffic.
Difficult to explain their performances in the early season. I wonder, has there been any adjustments to the BOP for the Porsche? Maybe they felt that they were slightly at the wrong end of the BOP formula. But right now, Bachler currently second quickest, just a quarter of a second down, and Dries van Thor he's backed out of it now. He's sort of stuck in a group of cars. So that's good performance indeed from the Dynamic Motorsport Porsche team to get that car up there. And Daniel Serra still third, Fred Verviers fourth. But I can't even read it. The timing and scoring screen is awful. Mirko Bortolotti fifth, and Mervyn Kierkhofer. Haven't mentioned the 38 McLaren. It was actually a little bit higher a couple of laps ago, and it's just down to sixth now.
Yeah, McLaren's most recent overall win was here in 2016. So it's a very long gap, the longest gap between victories amongst the active brands that we have in the championship these days. But it's a different type of McLaren, different team as well, but there's scope for that car to deliver a good result this weekend. So as you look there at Hiroshi Tomita, 14th he is. Number 33 Audi. Tomita onto the Mistral straight, and only 2 more minutes of this session to go. He'll get 1 more lap out of this, assuming that it's worth persevering. The team may elect to bring cars in just a little bit earlier and then be able to get the next driver set fair for the next part of qualifying.
Interestingly, the best Mercedes, not surprisingly, Raffaele Marcello, is only 9th quickest, followed by the number 2 Mauro Engel, 10th. So the 2 Mercedes that one normally is assuming will be pretty much at the head of a field don't have right now the pace to get them up into the front 2-3 rows of the grid. If there's 2 more sessions to go, that may change. But it's indicative that the quickest drivers, one would assume that you call Engel and Marcello in the respective cars the quickest drivers, only able to do 9th and 10th quickest at this moment with 1 minute and 20 to go.
So for WRT, they've got Dries van Thor the fastest by 0.244 of a second. Klaus Bachler's Porsche second, Daniel Serra in the Ferrari third, Verviers fourth, Bortolotti fifth, Kierkhofer sixth, Nicholas Nielsen for Ferrari seventh, Michele Beretta is 8th for Lamborghini, 9th is Raffaele Marciello Mercedes, 10th is Mauro Engel Mercedes. So surprising that the Mercs aren't higher up than that.
Well, that's just the point I was making, that Mauro Engel now in the pit, so he'll not be continuing on. Raffaele Marcello is on a lap. He's got a personal best in Sector 2, but nothing in Sector 1. So, well, he's picked up in terms of lap time, but he's still currently only 9th quickest. And I would say that would be of a concern to the brand, that they're not quite at the races as one would expect them to be.
Well, the flag is imminent, isn't it? Because we haven't got long to go before the first 20 minutes are up.
Nicholas Nielsen had jumped up to 5th, but Marcello actually, just as we speak, has now managed to get the Mercedes, the AMG team Akidus ASP. God, it takes a month to get it all out. They're actually up to 5th place. So good job by Marcello on that last lap. And session finished. There is Marcello coming through the tight little chicane down at the far end of the circuit. There's the 71 Ferrari following it. So that car with Daniel Serra behind the wheel is currently 3rd, and most likely is going to remain 3rd. As we go, oh, and who is that? That's the sister car, the 51 Iron Lynx. And that's a bit of an off. And whether he did that after the checkered flag is he sending a little message to the Audi that maybe you got on my way or whatever? I don't know. So Nicholas Nielsen going slowly back to pit lane.
Well, Nicholas Nielsen ends the session 6th, but that might be looked at. But it had been a good lap up to that point, but in the end he bails, so abandons that lap. He was doing very well at that point, but let's try and piece together what happened up towards senior here, John.
Yes, as usual story, catching a slower car against the Butch and Gignon Audi, but runs wide. Did he go? Oh, look, wow, talk about wide. He ended up in Toulon, which is the famous military port about 30 kilometers from the racetrack.
Then he had to pay to get back in there. So back onto the racetrack comes Nicholas Nielsen, but the lap had gone. Well, Dries van Thor is the fastest then at the end of the first part of qualifying. So the time 1:53.864. That's the target now. But of course, the order will start to shuffle as you aggregate these times. And then it's the average of those three. But Dries van Thor, the fastest from Klaus Bachler. Daniel Serra third, Fred Vervies fourth. Audi, Porsche, Ferrari up at the pointy end. Best of the Mercedes fifth in the end. Raffaele Marciello ahead of Nicholas Nielsen sixth. Bortolotti drops to seventh. Kirchhoff and McLaren eighth. Beretta ninth. Maro Engel 10th. But enough variety there.
Yep. But what we'll be wearing, as an example, for the 88 Mercedes, Marcello, he's almost, not quite 0.4 of a second away from the quickest time, which is Dries van Thor on the 32 Audi. And you know, that might be, in my view, the team's hot gun behind the wheel. So 0.4, what is going to happen for the other two drivers?
You just saw Nicholas Nielsen having a quick word with Marius Zug about what was going on up at senior, but Dries van Thor is the fastest then at the end of Q1. Let's hear from him with Gemma Scott.
Dries looking very relaxed and calm after that session. It's hot out there, it's tough out there, but that purple towards the end of the quali.
Yeah, I mean, happy with my lap. I think couldn't really improve afterwards anymore. The tires also faded away. It's getting hot, but my lap was good. I was happy with my lap. So, but it's a good Q1. Let's see what my two teammates can do. For sure, they can do a good job and try to at least start on the front two rows. I think it's important here, especially for a 6-hour race.
You certainly seem to be coming into this weekend on a high after your success at Nürburgring.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun when you come into a weekend after another good weekend. Especially winning Nürburgring is a very tricky race, but it's just a confident boost. But at the end, you just have to start over here again and work again as hard as we can. And the car has been working phenomenally already the whole weekend. As soon as we put the car on the ground, it's been working really well. So great job by the team as well to prepare this car as good as possible for this race. And hopefully we can do a good job today.
And just finally looking at that quali time and where Acadis are down sort of 8th or 9th, I think they finished. They seem to be generally your main competitors. The Mercedes are going to struggle a little bit against the Audi this weekend?
Let's see. I mean, it's always a cat and mouse game with all this things that everybody does, but let's see in the race. I mean, qualifying is always a tricky thing for one lap, but let's see how the race paces for everyone.
Thanks, Dries.
Thank you.
Well, Dries van Thor, as we were saying, coming here on the back of a good result a week ago in the non-championship Nürburgring 24 hours. This is the order at the end of that first session. So Dries van Thor ahead of Klaus Bachler, Daniel Serra's Ferrari third, Fred Vervies taking fourth fastest time from Raffaele Marciello. Then a slightly grumpy Nicholas Nielsen, feeling he had his last lap ruined by a slower car. Mirko Bortolotti seventh from Marvin Kirchhoff, and then Michele Beretta. It is Maro Engel 10th from Costa Lapalainen and Jean-Baptiste Simonard going nicely. Dominic Baumann, Christopher Hasse, and Maxime Martin fifth, keeping out of strife in the rebuilt Beach Team Aston Martin. 16th fastest, the number 50 Rover Racing BMW, but the Northern Irish driver Dan Harper was behind the wheel of, ahead of Al-Faisal Al-Zubair. Arjun Maini next for HRT, Janis Fitcher ahead of Reichi Tomita, Nick Yololi 21st, and then Lorenzo Petresi was the driver 22nd fastest ahead of Ollie Milroy. Then Marius Zug, who might have got in the way towards the end, as you saw, of Nicholas Nielsen. Sandy Mitchell next from Lucas Legere, and then Leo Roussel. Keep on going, pick out one or two more. You've got the Sky Tempesta Mercedes 33rd. Finlay Hutchison's WRT Audi ahead of Christian Klein. So the number 111 McLaren not really delivering what the Jota entry was doing. Manuel Maldonado is a long way back, 40th as well. Sean Walkinshaw for the Mad Panda squad currently 43rd. but things will change as you start to aggregate these averages of the 3 drivers. The Winwood Racing Mercedes, Jens Liebhauser 46th from Sebastian Bode, Alexander West's McLaren 48th, and the Bentley, we know we're not going to see, that has been withdrawn with its engine dramas, so 53 cars in total now. So let's have a quick look at one or two of the highlights. It was relatively trouble-free. Cars venturing out onto the circuit with, as ever, some eager to be at the front of the queue, try and get themselves some clear track space, others abiding their time. Other teams, of course, working out when to send your fastest driver. Do you put him in at the start? Do you put him out at the end? This was the car that had its tyre go down. Number 10 Audi of Adam Eteki brought the car back to the pit lane as Dries van Voor charged on, and he put the WRT Audi up to the top of the times. Klaus Battler doing a very good job for the dynamic motorsport team in the Porsche, second fastest, and Nicholas Nielsen having a real go right at the very end, coming across Marius Zug, who didn't seem to do anything wrong. They weren't absolutely nose to tail, but Nicholas Nielsen ending up going off the racetrack and feeling as though Zug had impaired him in some way by the body language that we saw between those 2 drivers at the end of the session. So now we are able to get going for Q2 very shortly, and it's going to be interesting to see not only, John, who is fastest in the isolated Q2, but what that then does to the grid.
It's going to be interesting because the grip that the 32 Audi has secured in Q1 is certainly going to give them a little bit of flexibility amongst those that are around it. Primarily, if you look at the 88 Mercedes, which finished up, in fact, in 5th overall, but virtually 4/10 of a second away. That's a big chunk of time to find, and I doubt that's going to be within the car or within the drivers. If we look at Valentino Rossi preparing himself, he's going to be 3rd into the car, so Nico Müller will be in the car, the 46 WRT Audi, as Chris Froggatt prepares to go out, get behind the wheel, and see if they can find more time, having had to change the chassis because of damage from that test of Manicourt. Is this chassis actually going to give them a better result, more confidence? I don't know what the issue that the team had, if there were mentions of other areas where they weren't comfortable, but now we've got a fresh chassis, take it from there.
Now, just go back to the end of Q1. Nicholas Nielsen we saw going way wide at senior in the Ferrari. The team are going to the stewards to investigate whether the car was blocked. We'll have a look in a moment and just get your idea as to whether there was blocking that took place. But it's interesting that clearly the Iron Lynx team feels that something was not right in all of that. So let's just have another look. The Iron Lynx car, of course, operated by AF Corsa. Everyone goes pouring out to Q2, but that does give us time just to cover off this moment. It was Marius Zug in the Audi, Nicholas Nielsen in the Ferrari. So they were on the run along the Mistral Straight up towards senior when the incident occurred. Take a look at that in a second as you see everybody making their way out on track for Q2. There is the Ferrari, so it's good to go. So that's the Ferrari we're talking about. Now, John, have a look at this.
Right, the Audi leading the Ferrari. I suspect the Audi lifted off big time. Nielsen fully committed on full throttle, and then suddenly he realizes the apex of the corner, I've got to get out of it. And he is traveling, what, 20, 30 kilometers an hour quicker than the Audi. The Audi was not either aware of the Ferrari's closing speed or just wasn't aware. And Nielsen, that's the reason why he had to make a very sudden cut to the left, which then got him onto the dirty part of the racetrack. So really, I think it was the Audi not being aware of the closing speed of Nielsen, and consequently leading to what could have been an unfortunate moment. Nielsen did a good job to keep everything pointing in the correct direction, but clearly, having had 2 green sectors in the first 2 sectors, would feel genuinely aggrieved that I lost my time because the Audi was not aware of what was happening on the racetrack.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a definite block, but certainly it was impeded. That,
yeah, absolutely
the Ferrari was impeded.
There's nothing intentional about it. Just you've got to be on your toes at every point. You may be coming in. Maybe Zug was coming in. I don't know, but he certainly wasn't at racing speed as he entered, and may have backed off. And of course, that just threw Nielsen a curved ball, which he wasn't prepared for.
So we'll keep an eye to whether anything does come of that. Might be a finger wag, might be something more serious, might be thrown out, you never know. We go again, this is Q2, so different driver in all the cars, of course, this time, and some still making their way out onto the circuit, including there the number 50 BMW. 33 Audi goes through with Arnold Robin at the wheel. Now, are we going to have another Audi at the top of the times, or is it going to be a different brand here? The way that WRT was looking in that first session suggests it's going to be very strong once more, doesn't it?
Well, Kelvin van der Linde is behind the wheel of the 32 Audi, so he's capable of matching anything Dries van Thor will have done. There's the 88 Mercedes now, Danny Juncadella behind the wheel of that. So you have to say that the various strengths between the Mercedes and the Audi would favour, in my view, right now, Audi 32 consolidating its position as being quickest in both these qualifying segments.
Now, Danny Juncadella has been installed behind the wheel of 88, and this ought to be, again, a quick car. So he's already done the absolute best within that first sector, pushing. Remember, the time to beat out of Q1 was a 1:53.864 lap, and there, Danny Juncadella, having taken the car over from Raffaele Marciello, and will give the car over to Jules Gounon, who's been winning in British GT, in German GT, in Intercontinental GT at Bathurst. He will do the final stint. I've got to say, this is a strong car for the race.
Very into, yeah, absolutely. The 88 always is a strong car. Listen, can we hear? No, we had to cut away. I just wanted to see how much throttle Juncadella was using coming through, and he just gets back to the right side of those floppy markers. But of course, now into that long Crusade corner, he's just had to back out of it. He's had to be patient. He'll look to see if he can find a way past, and he's got through. But the damage has been done in terms of any lap time, and whether this is on a fresh set of tyres or the set of tyres that Marciello used for his best lap in sector in qualifying 1, and then a fresher set of tyres will go on. Kelvin van der Linde, just looking at the timing and scoring, has got purple in sector 2. So, in fact, sector 1. So Kelvin van der Linde on his opening flying lap, as we still ride with Juncadella, comes across start-finish line. He'll record a good time, but not going to be a time that's going to make a lot of difference. In fact, looking to see where that 88 is.
88 goes quickest, 1:54.664, Danny Juncadella. Kelvin van der Linde then heading up towards the completion of the lap.
He's gotten through one of the dynamic Porsches, gotten through cleanly, so that's not really going to have any big bearing. All he has to do now in these final corners as he comes to the completion of a flying lap is to make sure everything is done neat and tidy, particularly here. And traffic ahead again going to come into play. Is he going to dive down the inside, around the outside? He's gone around the outside. Everybody stayed on the line, compromised, but he's done a good job. They did a good job. Davide Rigo also looking very quick, fastest overall sector 1.
Indeed so, as van der Linde goes through. There is number 71. Davide Rigon. So Kelvin van der Linde goes quickest in Q2, 1:54.260. And at the moment, that is the car that is fastest overall. Now, James Collado in 51 Ferrari goes to the top of the times in Q2, 1:54.228, and that's second on aggregate.
And Davide Rigon in the 71. Oh, who's that behind the wheel? That is the 71, giving it. 51 is quickest, 71 has got quickest. I'm just getting at the two Ferraris. So Rigon's on a 53.423. And Kelvin van der Linde is 0.8 of a second behind in second place. So that's a big difference between the fastest and second currently, with what we've got 7.5 minutes remaining.
So it puts 71 fastest on aggregate. There is 51, which is James Collado behind the wheel. Now that car has suddenly dropped away. I think it's had a lap time taken off it for track limits, because James Collado disappears from the timing screen. I thought he had a time, but he's now not got a time to his name, so there might be something sinister though. With 7 minutes to go, you would anticipate the car would have had a lap time against it. I'm sure I'd seen one. So Rigon, van der Linde, and then Ethan Simeone for McLaren. Now that's a good effort.
I mean, again, another time. Where does that time come from? Third quickest. So that's an impressive run for Simeone in the 159 Garage 59 McLaren. And Marcus Sorensen, Matteo Drudi suddenly pops up into second place in the number 12. Tressler by Car Collection. Keep forgetting Tressler by Car Collection. Audi. And then 57. What is going on? Windward Racing. Surely. Is that right? 57.
It's changing all the time.
Lorenzo Ferrari,
yeah.
second quickest.
That's good effort. Here comes James Collado up towards the line. Look at his feet. John working away. We've seen him standing on the brakes. Now he's standing on that loud pedal as he breaks the beam. And James Collado does a 1:54.421. So gets the car up the order within the session. Puts it 6th. Let's hope that lap stays.
But Kom Lenegar in the 54 Dynamic Motorsport Porsche, he's elevated himself up to 3rd quickest. So that'll be satisfying for the Dynamic Motorsport team to get their drivers further up the qualifying order, but still the Ferrari by name dominating the front row or the front 2 positions currently.
Because number 57, there it is, the Mercedes with the former Superstars driver Lorenzo Ferrari at the wheel of it, coming up towards the right-hander of Senior, goes through, rides the curb on the outside line. This is looking good, but the traffic might well get in the way here. David Irigon the quickest by a whopping 7/10ths of a second. Only 5.5 minutes of Q2 still to go, of course.
And there's the usual indication, I'm coming through, I'm the quicker car, let me get through, don't impede me. So Lorenzo Ferrari, currently 2nd quickest. I mean, that is, I've taken my breath away. Windward Racing have found pace. And then they got Lucas Auer, who is pretty impressive likewise. So maybe we're going to have to consider this gold category Mercedes as a top 10 contender.
It's looking stronger all the time, isn't it? So Ferrari comes through, and that lap is a 1:54.463. The car isn't really in the mix on the aggregate as yet, but it's got good pace certainly in Ferrari's hands right now. Lorenzo Ferrari then bouncing it over the curb coming out of turn 2. 4 minutes and change on the clock. Let's have a replay of what was going on at Senior. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Around goes the Ferrari there.
Yes, and that's a set of flat-spotted tyres if you ever have seen it.
Definitely. And also in avoidance, the AF Corsa car demolished the marker on the outside of Senior. So those little floppies that are there to tell you when to get back on the racetrack, to divide the line between what's acceptable and what's not, they've gone. So for the moment, it's open house at Senior now.
Technically, yes. I don't know whether you'd get away with it if you started to still go behind where those floppies were fundamentally mounted. Kevin van der Linde down on the far end of the circuit, the beginning of the preparation to get onto Mistral Straight. Be careful on the exit here of turn 7. That's where you will also get pinged. You can see the floppies to stop driving. We've seen drivers go 4 wheels, 8 wheels, whatever wheels off track there as they try to ease the exit of the corner to get maximum drive onto the scene.
That spinning Ferrari, I think, was the Iron Dames car, Sarah Bovey at the wheel of it. Again, we've got silly little margins between cars, 1,000th here, 3,000th there, looking down. And in fact, if you get within Q2 to 30th between Hugo Vallon and Ollie Wilkinson, they are on identical times to the 1,000th of a second, 1:55.181, or they were, because now things start to shuffle around them. But it's remarkable how close and how competitive this is.
Kelvin van der Linde, unusual line. The Musée going around the 98 BMW. Where are the BMWs? This is the brand new M4 Evo M Sport, and it's not yet, in my view, delivering what I had hoped it would be delivering.
We're quicker in this session than in Q1, which is understandable given that the cars are a bit lighter. David Irigon, there he is, has done a 53.4 as against a 1:53.8 of Dries van Thor in the first session. Wide there, going towards Beausset. Might be a track limit issued that, because of course if you do go wide and maintain the momentum and then fire the car across to the apex for the exit of the corner, an advantage gain. But I think Rigon has backed out.
Yeah, he has. Either he realised he might have had that time looked at. Certainly he backed off, looking now for, I mean, he had purple in that first sector. There's the 88 Mercedes. So Juncadella still pounding around. He's up to 8th in his qualifying segment, so that's just a little bit behind where, again, a lot of drivers doing this now. They're going very, very wide to then, as you point out, just make the apex actually a straight line rather than still a part of the turning part of the corner.
Fire across the racetrack, don't they? So you're riding on board then with Juncadella. 4th he is, and the flag is not that far away now. We've got less than 2 minutes to go. We've got a yellow out in the 3rd sector as well. So somebody has had a moment. Juncadella comes into the pit lane, because if there's a yellow out, you can't really improve. The yellow goes in. So briefly, things affected, but only briefly. So very slow run into the pit lane.
Yeah, into the pit lane. So there is the 95, 98, I should say, not 95, 98. BMW up at scene. That was the scene of the 95's Aston Martin's incident yesterday. So again, that sort of much higher mid-part, and then the drop off a trans straight line, the exit to get a run up into the sequences. This left-hand corner has always been a bogey corner. It's always a corner. If you've got an understeering car, it'll understeer there.
There's one missing from this session, which I think is number 10 Audi, because we should have 53. We've only got 52 of them out there, and I think that after Adam Ateki had his puncture, that car may still be in the pit lane, possibly with a bit more residual damage.
Yeah, there's that. He drove most of the lap coming in with no rubber on the tyre at all. So when the tyre deteriorates and then just collapses as it would have done, then that flailing rubber does not do a lot of good to the bodywork, to the suspension, and anything else that's under the wheel arch.
So the flag is imminent as Alfred Renard turns through Signy. Remember that new for this year we have the Gold Cup, where you put a gold or platinum with a silver and a bronze. And that was a very competitive category at Imola. Right now, the best of those in the Gold Cup. Number 5, the Arjun Maini, Hubert Haupt, Florian Scholzer Mercedes. But Alfred Renard, who is very proficient at winning endurance races, comes up towards the flag, and the session is now at an end. So that is the end of Q2. Another spin being confirmed. Louis Machiels having had a moment towards the end of the session, as down the pit road, if that comes the Porsche, Renard brings it in early. Doesn't take the flag on the track, but that gives them another couple of minutes to do the driver change. There's Kelvin van der Linde then, 5th only at the end of Q2, and the car 2nd on aggregate now.
Yeah, that's a disappointment because he didn't get into the 153s, which was the time that Dries van Thor achieved. So that will be a disappointment for Kelvin personally, but also for WRT, because what looks as if we're going to see that the strength that we've seen from the Iron Lynx Ferraris yesterday looks like it's going to come to the fore again.
And Marco Sorensen comes in 6th in that session, repaying the hard work of all the mechanics overnight, because that was, as John was making the point earlier, a decidedly second-hand Aston Martin, to the point that we were looking at it yesterday saying, is that it for the weekend? Is it done? Loosely
described as, it was a biggie.
It was. It was indeed. Very nearly T-bones the Mercedes, though, as he arrives in the pit lane. He gets in. So that is a great effort by Davide Rigon, just to, in a sense, welcome him back, really, because, of course, Davide was one of those drivers involved in the Spa accident last year, which knocked him about quite a bit, and he had to sit out, really, the bulk of the second half of the season. But it's good that he's back, not only racing, but being as quick as ever.
Indeed. Well, a lot of things can happen to a driver when you had an incident, an accident of that magnitude. And Jack Aiken, of course, was the punch bowl, basically. He got hit 3 separate times as his car was spinning, and bits of it were literally shedding all over the racetrack. So Davide Rigon took time to enable his recovery to be complete and not try and rush back and drive through discomfort or possibly pain. But the results are he's quickest overall in this session with 153.4, single quickest lap that we've seen in qualifying so far.
So at the end of that session, let's have a look at the order at the end of Q2. This is the overall situation now, so take the 2 sessions and combine them. So Daniel Serra and Davide Rigon ahead of Dries van Thor and Kelvin van der Linde. Klaus Battler and Comme Ledegaard 3rd. Raffaele Marciello, Danny Junqueradea 4th, ahead of Fred Vervish and Nico Muller, and then Mirko Bortolotti and Jack Aitken rounding out the top 6. Now again, there's enough variety there to make this a really interesting front of the grid. 7th, Christopher Hasser and Matthew Drudi. 8th, Costa Lapalainen and Thomas Tuula. Michele Barretta and Yuki Namoto, and then Maxime Martin and Marco Sorensen round out the top 10. Nicholas Nielsen and James Colado's efforts good enough for 11th, and Jean-Baptiste Semenau and Benji Goethe 12th. Nick Yellerly and Nick Katzberg 13th, ahead of Janis Fitje and Alain Vallon, and then Marius Zug and Nicholas Scherls Audi rounding out the top 15. 16th is where you find the Jota McLaren that Marvin Kirchhofer and Ollie Wilkinson have had a go in now. Axel Jeffries, Christopher Mies, Thomas Drouet and Hubert Haupt with their lap times all rounding out the top 20, ahead of Neil Verhagen and Marius Narken 22nd. Hugo Valente 23rd, ahead of Arthur Rougier and Marcus Winkelhock 25th, the hugely experienced German driver. Theo Nouet, I should say, Sarah Bovy, Brendan Reed, then Vincent Abril and Lorenzo Ferrari ran out the top 30. Still expecting more to come out of that JP Motorsport McLaren. It's up to Dennis Lynn now to see what magic he can work. Diego Menchaca with Finlay Hutchison 31st. Ethan Simeone, who was good early on aggregate, 32nd with Manuel Maldonado. Nicholas Bart's ahead of Arnaud Robin, Stan Schotthorst, Valentin Pierberg, Brendan Leach. Rob Collard ahead of Chris Froggatt on average. Then Alfred Renard from Benoit Moulin, Cedric Sprazzioli. Miguel Ramos next from Joe Osborne. Franco Girolami comes behind for the Mad Panda Motorsport team. As I say, there are 53 in the session. Only 52 did we see in Q2 because that number 10 Audi missing. Karim Auger not being able to go out after a bit of damage done with that puncture towards the mid part of Q1. So at the end of Q2, Davide Rigon looking very, very strong indeed. Let's hear from the Italian driver then now, because Davide, out of the Iron Lynx Ferrari, is ready to talk to Gemma.
Davide, a great session for you there. Puts you fastest overall in the aggregate and 3/4 of a second faster. That covers the next 21 cars behind you.
Yes, it was actually a lucky session for me because in the end I was able to put together a complete lap with no traffic at all and preparing a good lap before the tire. So actually I used really the peak of the tire, especially on the third sector. So I was very happy to don't find any traffic. It was not easy with 54 car here. So yeah, very happy. Our car balance is good on the single lap. Now we need to work for the race. There's nothing to do yet, but very, very happy from my team and from myself to put together this lap without traffic.
And I saw you just before we spoke to you there talking to Antonio as he gets in the car, chatting about the circuit, the sectors. Where are you feeling strongest?
Yeah, it was up to me what I invent. No, nothing. I just drive like normal. The key is to have a free lap, to have a good preparation without any too much traffic on the preparation lap, and then have to be free on the good lap. Yeah, the key is the first sector, of course. You need to work on the first sector, and that is where you gain the most, of course.
Well, it was a great session, a great time. Thank you very much, Davide.
See you later.
Good to have him back. Good that he's going so well. Davide Rigon then fastest at the end of Q2. Quick look at what happened in that session as the cars ventured out, headed by James Collado from the Iron Lynx team at least. He was the first of those cars down the pit road. The sun started a flying lap, so the pit lane was still emptying. Dani Junqueira pressing on for the number 88 Acodis ASP Mercedes team with a bit of a twitch going through senior. Number 32 taken over by Kelvin van der Linde, the car that was fastest in Q1, but it wasn't long before Davide Rigon went to the top of the time as the Iron Lynx Ferrari looking very strong indeed. Sarah Bovy had a spin coming out of senior. 52 Ferrari in avoidance got rid of the last of those markers on the outside of the right-hander, as 57 with Lorenzo Ferrari at the wheel was looking really strong early doors in Q2. Out wide went Kelvin van der Linde. Davide Rigon managing to find clear track space for at least the bulk of a lap and to go fastest in Q2. So Q3 coming up in a minute and 10 seconds time, and now of course the cars, having burnt off fuel, are at their lightest, and this is the last opportunity for drivers to set a decent time and therefore shuffle the grid. It's not all, of course, in a 6-hour race about where you start, but to a point here, particularly with that pinch point, John, at the first couple of corners, further up the grid you are, the more chances you have of keeping out of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult entry into the first turn left, then it's a bit of a dip, and then you go out to the right, and often we see cars having to cut across the inside of that, what you might call shallow S, that conforms or makes up turns 1 and 2, simply because it's a log jam. You can't, there's nowhere to go. And if you make up positions, then you will be required to give those positions back as the race starts to get underway. But it's always a pinch point in the opening lap of a 6-hour race.
Well, for number 46 now, Valentino Rossi will be on board. Look out from our commentary box window. There are lots of 46 fans opposite us. There is a Valentino Rossi shop as ever in the paddock that's been doing a roaring trade. There was a queue of autograph hunters yesterday and again this morning. So Valentino Rossi we will see on track in this session. He has won here, in fact, on 2 wheels back in 1997. He won the 125 Grand Prix. But in cars, this is something very different for him.
I don't think the 125cc World Championship will actually give him very much benefit.
Do you not think?
I don't think so.
Okay.
A little two-stroke, radically, your 2 fingers holding the clutch, waiting for it to pinch as you go down the Mistral straight, 25,000 RPM or whatever it was doing.
I wonder how long it took him to do a lap around here on that.
Oh,
not the work of a moment.
Let's say you'll probably be lucky to do it in about less. A motorbike, 2.5 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more, 2 minutes, 40 seconds.
Well, he is a Paul Ricard winner, if nothing else, but like you correctly say, it's so different. Session is live, hardly any takers. The pit lane remains remarkably calm at the moment. Right, out goes the first of the Beach Dean Aston Martins. This really is the calm before the storm. You know what's going to happen. They're all going to leave it late and then moan about traffic at the end.
I mean, you couldn't make it up. But there we are. So the other fact is, as soon as one goes, then everybody else goes, oh, quick, we've got to go. Time to go. I mean, the discipline is having enough strength of character to say, no, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
The downside is that you may end up, if you go out after that 5 minutes of sitting in the pits, find a racetrack that's got red flagged or whatever. You can never control what's going to happen, even in a 15-minute qualifying session. So the reality is you need to be prepared to go out at the earliest opportunity to ensure that you get a lap in, regardless of whether it's fastest, second or third fastest.
So everyone comes pouring out onto the circuit then. And there goes number 21, Ferrari, the AF Corsa car that Alessandro Balzan is behind the wheel of.
Was that an unsafe release? Because suddenly the Ferrari, you can't see the numbers on it, just suddenly, there we go. Now watch this and see, is this an unsafe release? Oh, definitely,
yes.
Absolutely. Well, what was the man on the lollipop doing?
Well, indeed. I mean, the driver goes when he's told to. So
you lift the lollipop and you go.
Exactly. The case to answer there is from the mechanic, car controller. Right, well, that might end up on the desk of the stewards. So it is the number 71 Ferrari on provisional pole position. What you've got on that graphic is the combined order. What we have on our timing screen is the session order, so we can see who's done a good time, and then that timing tower that you can look at on the left-hand side there, covering up the back of the Ferrari, will be the order for the grid provisionally. Already we're down to 12 minutes. We've not seen a car go past our window yet because they haven't done an outlap.
Well, we've got lots of purple on timing and scoring, but that's just simply one car following another, going quicker through the speed traps or the timing segments. As we see, the 51.
That's 51.
Yes, 51. The yellow, 71 is the yellow.
It is, yes. So 51 now is Miguel Molina, and 71 is Antonio Fuoco.
It'll be the 71 that's got all to lose. If Fuoco cannot, in fact, just running not far behind. It was to come up behind the Iron Dames, and they're pinkish, reddish, yes. Pinkish Ferrari.
Greg Masters and the stewarding team totally agree with you. 21 under investigation, unsafe release.
That's a compliment.
There you go.
That's a compliment.
I don't think, to use one of your other phrases, you needed to be Sherlock Holmes to work that one out, because it was as clear as day, wasn't it, that the two cars brushed against each other and therefore something had to be looked at. But it just confirms what John was saying. The stewards will have a look at that as 51 Ferrari bails from the lap, crawls towards the end of it. They're all now like a slow bicycle race trying to get clear track space ahead.
Yeah, and Jules Gounon is the leader of that pack now. Comes on to start-finish straight. He's got a reasonable amount of space directly ahead of him, and this wide-angle camera shot doesn't really give you an indication as how close he is to the back of the... Well, he's got probably about a couple hundred meters, and he'll probably gobble all that up if he's got the pace in that 88 Mercedes. Certainly, Jules Gounon, again, another driver coming off a high of winning the famous Bathurst, the 12 hours, run in very mixed conditions.
And effectively back-to-back Bathurst wins, because he won the last edition just before we went into pandemics and lockdowns, and then he won the one on the reopening of it. It was more of a pro-am entry, admittedly, but even so, it was a race that Mercedes took very seriously as part of the IGTC. Took some good drivers out there, and Jules Gounon, part of that winning team. So he's won in the German Championship, the British Championship, and the Intercontinental GT Championship thus far this year.
There are a lot of competitors, principally pro drivers, who are all coming off highs in one form or another, coming here to Paul Ricard. Of course, this is a sort of a test in some respects for the 24 hours of Spa, which will come at the end of July. The lights flashing from Jules Gounon, wanting to make sure green in the middle sector, purple by half a second. So Nicky Team in the 95 Aston, 154.4. So this could be a sub-54 lap for Jules Gounon if he manages to clear the Porsche directly ahead of him.
Nicky Team has also now gone quickest on the aggregate, ahead of number 48. Number 46, I should say, from WRT. Now here is Gounon. Now this could be top in Q2, but more importantly, where is it going to put him on the average then as he comes into the Virage du Pont, makes the run up towards the line. Traffic has been relatively kind. There's a Porsche up the road, so we're looking now at something in the low 154s, 52, 53, 53.9. Gounon then goes fastest in Q3, a 153.900. He ran it wide at Senior, but he was the right side of the markers.
He just about was, but it doesn't. Just about is as good as was on the right side. And there, oh, that's the Lamborghini.
That is Isaac Tutumlu. So it is then 88 fastest on the average now. So that puts Gounon ahead of anybody else on the grid.
And he's still going.
Yeah.
He still thinks there's more in this set of tyres. But what he's got to now focus on is where is he going to meet this traffic. He's backed out of it, I think, as he came through the exit, just going into L'École, which is the left-hand corner that leads onto the Mistral Straight. There we see Charles Weerts in the 32 Audi getting on the old headlights. You're allowed to do it to a degree. Maybe in qualifying it's more acceptable. But one of the two repainted these new JP Motorsport, or repainted McLarens. One's got blue and pink, and the other's got pink and blue. Very matching.
Indeed, indeed. They were gold when we last saw them, but now a totally different look. Sort of candy floss colours. There is a rather frustrated Charles Weerts getting caught up behind 112, which is Joe Osborne at the wheel of it, another of the McLaren factory drivers. And Joe lets him by, yet to do a lap time. Charles Weerts, who was here late yesterday, having done his university English exam, comes up towards the end of the lap.
71 Ferrari is quickest on this session, 153.6. And that is the best lap of this third and final qualifying session.
Other cars joining in. There is up to Tutumlu, I think, after a pit stop just to check any damage after the spin, possibly get some new tyres on the car. And the other McLaren, 111, Dennis Lind, yet to do a lap time as well. So was Giacomo Altway.
Matteo Caroli, 54 Dynamic Motorsport Porsche.
Goes second fastest. Indeed. Second in Q2, second on average. So 71 now. Anthony Fuoco is top, ahead of Cairoli, and then Gounon within the third qualifying session on average. Gounon down to fourth behind Weerts.
And he's backed out of it as well. Wasn't a great lap. He's making space, letting other traffic go through. So again, 6.5 minutes of the session remaining. Wants one more lap just to consolidate back up to speed as he comes into these final two corners, Virage de la Tour, and then the final corner to the right called Virage du Pont. Well, where's the bridge? Well, that bridge is actually in the pit lane.
That's right. There are lots of tunnels to get you from one side of the circuit into the other around that section. As you look there at 188, McLaren dancing its way towards the turn 3. Yep, Hugo Chavez. It's an outstanding effort, that way up the curve. Now, of course, Enrique Chavez, experienced driver, and comes now onto the Mistral Straight, looking mighty indeed.
So a long drag. So McLaren trying to pick up a little bit of aero from the Mad Panda Mercedes, but really you can see there's nothing. It'll all be about who can get into scene first, and it's a big, brave move if he thinks he can get down the inside of the Mercedes, and he has to back out of it. Certainly he has to breathe, but that's a great lap. Third quickest in the section, 153.8, and sort of came from nowhere.
Absolutely, but Enrique Chavez goes wide there, backs out of the lap. Again, we saw him do great things last season when he was in a Barwell Lamborghini, but Enrique Chavez now for Garage 59, last year's Pro-Am Sprint champion with Miguel Ramos. Switching brand, switching team for this year. Right, Thomas Neubauer, outright winner in Sprint Cup in the past, comes up towards the line.
Purple Sector 1.
Yeah. Remember him in his Mercedes days. We know that Neubauer is quick. Well, how quick? He goes fifth in Q3. So Thomas Neubauer goes through. fact, the timing screen has him 4th, not 5th, but it was 5th on that graphic. It's 5th overall, it's 4th in the session. And Thomas Neubauer brings the WRT Audi into contention then.
I mean, cars out of position in the first 2 segments of qualifying, all of a sudden popping up into the top 10.
There's 71, which is Antonio Fuoco, fastest thus far. This is the car on pole position, goes quicker again. A 1:53.438 then, so Fuoco, having had a lap worth of a breather, wasn't as good as he had been in Sector 1. Did a personal best in Sector 2, an absolute best in Sector 3. Bang, 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 it all fits together, and he's 0.333 of a second quicker in Q3.
Looks as if, with just under 4 minutes remaining, nobody, I mean, Neubauer is the one that's elevated himself up into 4th in this 3rd qualifying segment, but it doesn't look like there's anybody else who, Valentino Rossi, by the way, just note, has done a good job up. He was 13th a second ago, just dropped 1 position down to 14th, so Valentino at 1:54.429. Knows he's got to deliver. There is the great man behind the wheel, and working his way. It's taking time, it's taking longer. I know that he wants to find himself running at a comparable pace to his 2 teammates, and it'll take a season for him to work his way through and learn a new car, learn a new skill.
About 2 hours of track time in this race will be the longest he's had in this car in race trim, so that's going to really help because he can do a lot of learning. I know it's the same track lap after lap, but there will be differences as the amount of rubber goes down, as the car feels different, and if he does a double stint, therefore staying behind the wheel, he can take a car that's heavy to light, then back to heavy again, feel the differences and do an awful lot of learning.
And I would say that in the case of his car, that's got to be the object of this exercise this weekend. They're not looking at getting on the podium. That would be a bonus. What they're looking at is gaining time behind the wheel in preparation for what will be then the event of the year. Oh, the McLaren looking a bit squirrely as it ran over that rougher part of the racetrack coming up into the entry into turn 1 and 2.
Well, last year here we had Lamborghini on pole position, which was the Mecco Bortolotti, Andrea Caldarelli, Marco Mappelli Huracan. The race was won by Porsche last year, the GPX racing car.
Oh.
Way out wide, Charles Weirt's there. What's he up to?
No, he made a mistake under brakes. The back end got away, had to steer into it, and he ran wide. So you're just pushing up. Personal best, Sector 1 and Sector 2. I mean, that car is, in terms of only 16th quickest in this session. So there was a lot of pressure on Charles Weirtz to get in a time to get that car back up into, ideally, the top 10, even better into the top 6. And that loss of time is just really, he's got 1 more lap to do it in. And now you can see just going so slow coming through Virage du Pont onto start finish straight. Got to do it all over again, and this is the last time in qualifying he's going to have a chance.
So a minute and a half on the clock. There is number 51 Ferrari, which is still pushing on. That's Miguel Molina. And he's down a little bit in the middle sector on this lap, but it was looking good at the start, wasn't it, as he comes up towards the timing line now. He will wring 1 more lap out of this. Lucas Auer has just gone 3rd for Winward in Q3. And then Molina goes across the line, and that puts him 9th on average as he goes through and is 12th in this session.
A lot of, interesting times coming from the 3 drivers across the board in all 3 qualifying segments, and would you make it up? I mean, you look through the entry list, 54 cars, maybe only 53 on track, and you're talking about 160 odd drivers. Stick the tail on that donkey.
Absolutely right. And the flag is imminent, 34 seconds on the clock as there Charles Weirtz presses on. Now, where is he in this session? He's quite a long way down, isn't he? Because he's only 17th in Q3, and he's not improved in Sector 1 either. No,
this is going to be a disappointing, put it that way, session qualifying for Charles Weirtz, and not an awful lot he's going to do about it. He's got another Audi directly ahead of him, so he's going to have to back out of it. There's no way he can find a way around. Well, he's been given the track space, but he's lost the momentum, and in fact on this lap he didn't have any. You can see his times in Sector 1 and Sector 2 were down, particularly in Sector 2 on his previous best, so he might as well just drive into the pit lane. The flag's out now, there's nothing to be gained.
Exactly, they get 9 sets of tyres for the weekend, so they need to work those out across qualifying and the race. Charles Wirtz does indeed bail. So, Iron Lynx Ferrari takes pole position. It is number 71 then that is the fastest. The car in the hands of Antonio Fuoco, Davide Rigon and Daniel Serra. And that's a very, very good effort ahead of 54. The Porsche in the hands of Matteo Caroli, Klaus Bachler and Comme Ledegar. And then the best Audi third, number 32. So Charles Wirtz may have been a long way down in that session, best part of a second adrift, but on average, on aggregate, the car still takes third.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be counting their blessings because that is getting onto the front row of the grid would have been ideal. To consolidate on the second row of the grid, I think they'd be more than happy with that.
Well, there is the fastest Ferrari, and Antonio Fuoco, living up to his name, on fire in that, did a mighty job. At WRT, there are congratulations for the likes of Thomas Neubauer, who was doing an impressive job in the Rofco Gulf-coloured car. Ben Goethe goes to say well done. Thomas Neubauer perhaps is another one that doesn't get the credit he deserves. We've seen in the past in Mercedes how good he has been, in Ferrari Challenge how good he's been, but now adapting very rapidly and successfully to the Audi R8. So there the drivers go through the post-session conversations and debrief and have a look at the data and readiness for the race, as we can hear from Antonio Fuoco, because he has done a great job to be fastest.
Antonio, a smile, you did it, you nailed it. That final session confirmed the pole position for the 6-hour race.
Yeah, I think it was a good lap, but both of our three drivers did a really good job today. So we optimized what we had. We did all of us a really good lap, and we know the race is quite long. So now we just need to be focused on the race, and we try to do our best.
Absolutely. Congratulations to all three of you. Well done. Thank you.
So well done to Antonio Fuoco, to Davide Rigon, and to, of course, the third element of that team, Daniel Serra. So this is the provisional order, barring any grid drops, any penalties, and it is Ferrari from Porsche, from Audi, from Mercedes on the front two rows of the grid. Daniel Serra, Davide Rigon and Antonio Fuoco's efforts combined give them pole from Klaus Bachler, Comme Ledegar and Matteo Caroli. Dries van Thor, Kelvin van der Linde and Charles Wirtz third, ahead of Raffaele Marciello, Danny Juncadella and then Jules Gounon behind. Jean-Baptiste Simonauer, Benji Goethe, Thomas Neubauer fifth, and the best Lamborghini, pole last year but only sixth this year, Mirko Bortolotti, this time with Jack Aitken and Albert Costa. Fred Vavish, Nico Mola, Valentino Rossi, seventh from Christopher Hauser, Mattia Drudi and Luca Giotto. The second of the Iron Lynx Ferraris, ninth, Nicholas Nielsen, James Collado and Miguel Molina, with Maxime Martin, Marco Sorensen and Nicky Thiem being 10th. The best of the Silver Cup, Jean-Baptiste Simonauer, Benji Goethe, Thomas Neubauer. The best of the cars in the Gold Cup, number 7 McLaren, Ollie Milroy, Brendan Arieb and Frederick Schandorf, just ahead of the Winward Mercedes against Liebhauser, Lorenzo Ferrari and Lucas Auer. Best in Pro-Am was 188, the Garage 59, Alexander West, Miguel Ramos and Enrique Chavez, McLaren. So 53 cars we have for the start of this 6-hour race that will blast into life as close to 6 p.m. as can be arranged for the end of the formation lap. And this, the bottom end of the order, bearing in mind that so much of the work in qualifying, of course, is going to be changed when you get to the race itself. A word about the Bentley: it is an engine drama that has put that car out of the event. So it's shown as a DNS, well, it wasn't seen in qualifying, but it will not be seen either for the rest of the weekend, the rest of the day, sadly. And number 10 in strife after damage with a puncture suffered by Adam Ateki. So, has everybody got ready for qualifying? The drivers with those three aspects of the session, and at the start of Q3 dramas as Alessandro Balzan was released into the path of another car. That's being looked at by the stewards. A good early effort in number 51 from Miguel Molina. Really pushing hard though with Jules Gounon, and he did go top briefly, although in the end that car would end up 6th fastest in Q3. Charles Wirtz was looking good, but he had a wide moment late in the session. We also had number 54 of Matteo Caroli hustling itself up to 2nd in Q2 as Antonio Fuoco put number 71 Ferrari, or indeed secured number 71 Ferrari at the top of the time. 6 hours of action to look forward to at Paul Ricard a little bit later on. For now, from Gemma Scott in the pits, John Watson and David Addison, it's goodbye.